Welcome to our webinar by WFA Women's Fund Asia. Pim has started recording, and my name is Melaine. I am a program associate with WFA based in Malaysia, and we're very excited to have you all here with us today. Very good to meet new and old faces. I'm joined today by the WFA grants team. I think we have about 50 participants on this call out of the 170 who signed up. So we're very grateful for this interest from everyone. So let's do a quick round of introductions with the WFA team who will be joining us today. Himakshi, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Himakshi. I work as the program officer at Women's Fund Asia, and I'm based out of New Delhi.
Wei-san?
Yes. Sorry, Himakshi, are you having an issue with the presentation?
No, Wei-san, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, right, sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Wei-san. I'm one of the program officers on the grants team in WFA, and I am based in Malaysia.
Hi, everyone. This is Meenu. I work as a program officer with WFA, and I work from Delhi, India. Yes.
Suchi? Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Shuchi. I'm a program officer with WFA, and I'm based in New Delhi, India. Pim?
Hello, everybody. I'm a communications officer at WFA, and I'm based in Bangkok. Welcome.
Kishani, you're muted.
So sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Kishani. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations, and I'm based in Colombo, Sri Lanka.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Malin. I'm based in Bangkok, but I'm from the Philippines. Director of Programs, thanks for joining us again. And Milen, I pass it on back to you.
Thank you, Malin. Thank you, everyone from the grants team and Kishani and Pim. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that unfortunately, this webinar is only available in English, and this has not been able to provide accessibility for people with hearing or visual disabilities. We understand that this means that, the information that we're going to be covering today is not very accessible to many people, but we've tried to provide the call documents for our Strengthening Feminist Movements in 10 different Asian languages. And we have also provided, screen reader accessible versions of the English documents. So we will be in the future working on improving our capacity to support different languages and formats for calls for applications and in these webinars. So thank you so much for bearing with us. We also want to pop a quick note to say we are aware that we're currently having issues with our website. So we will, which means that you might not be able to view the application materials right now, but we will be providing those in the chat. Yes. So Himakshi, would you like to start off with some housekeeping notes?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, Melaine. Just want to quickly say welcome, everybody. Hi, and checking my audio. Is everything all right, Melaine? If you can hear me, can you give me a thumbs up?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so everybody, we're very excited to have you all with us, and we hope that through this webinar, we can make this application process a little bit easier for all of you. Just some very quick housekeeping announcements before we proceed. As you already know, the presentation part of this session, starting from now until we do the Q&A segment, will be recorded. This recording will be shared after the webinar on WFA's channels, social media, as well as YouTube. So, so that people who've not been able to join us today can actually view this. That's why we've also disabled video, voice, and public chat. So to keep in mind the interest of safety and anonymity of all the people who are attending today. If you do have any queries, comments, or concerns, please directly message Melaine. As you can see, her name reads Ask Me Melaine. So please feel free to message her throughout the presentation, but also just to let you know that there's a dedicated Q&A segment right after the presentation. So you can also send us your messages and questions then. Yeah. There may be some questions that we may not be able to answer right now, but we'll definitely make sure to respond to them via email once the webinar is open. And just to note that unfortunately, there are certain questions about registration or about the required documents that differ on a case-to-case basis, depending on the country you're in. So for those, we would definitely request that you write to us on our email ID, which we'll give in the end, and we can have a more one-on-one conversation with you about that. Okay, so let's just get started. The agenda for today is fairly straightforward. I'll briefly introduce the fund, then take you through the kind of groups we support, the kind of work we support, speak about the specific grants that you can apply for under this particular call, followed by a very quick snapshot of the application process. And then I'll hand over to my colleague Wei-san in the end for some tips on how to put forward a strong application, after which we'll open for questions. So, okay, moving on with the presentation. All right. So just a very brief overview about us. Women's Fund Asia is a regional feminist fund, and we support the realization of women's, girls, trans and intersex people's rights in Asia. We started in 2004 when we were working in 5 South Asian countries and have since then grown to resource feminist movements across 18 Asian countries. WFA acknowledges that while there's no consistent and agreed upon definition of girls, we do support the work of girls at 2 levels. One is directly funding girl-led groups between the ages of 18 and 24. And the other way we do this is by supporting work on the rights of young women and girls aged 13 and above. We also use the term trans as a placeholder here to cover a diversity of gender and gender identities and forms of gender expression that are claimed by people across the region. We support trans rights that includes rights of trans feminine, trans masculine, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people amongst other identities. So the kinds of groups that we prioritize are self-led groups that apply feminist principles and have a rights-based approach to furthering women's, girls, trans, and intersex people's rights. Just to give you, an example of this, when we're looking at self-led, what we essentially mean is that the board and the staff are led by the communities that the organization aims to serve. So for example, if it's a trans rights organization, then the board and the staff are led by somebody who identifies as trans. Similarly for women, girls, and intersex people organizations. We also focus on rights-based programming as part of the work that we do. And therefore the groups that we support should be committed to rights-based approaches. By this, we mean that their programs include some element of existing human rights framework, and that they place the rights of women, girls, trans, and intersex people at the heart of the programming, ensuring that the voices, leadership, and decision-making by these communities are integral to how the project is designed and implemented. So under this particular call, we're supporting individuals and organizations from 17 countries in Asia. This list is also available in the call guidelines, so you can find that on our website and go through it to see if your country is on it. I'm also just going to leave this here for a few seconds for you to go through and just see for this particular webinar as well. Of the 18 countries, Afghanistan is not on the list, but the other countries that we support are on this list. So under this particular grant call, we are offering 2 types of grants. One is a program grant, which would essentially be support for your specific project. The program grant also can include an institutional component for rent and salaries. The second type of grant is a fully institutional grant. This is only for small organizations and individuals. And again, we'll go into that a little bit more in detail as we move on with the presentation and the specific eligibility under the 2 grant programs. But this is just to let you know that as a regional feminist fund, we are committed to supporting core costs as well. So costs of rent, operations, and salaries is something that we cover in both our types of grants, program grants, as well as our fully institutional grants. There are some limitations, such as the institutional component doesn't cover land assets, but these are again available, this information is available in the call guideline as well. So you can go through that in more detail to understand what would be covered within the institutional cost and what would not be covered there. Okay, just to give you a quick overview of our priority areas. For this particular grant cycle, we have 5 priority areas to fund. The first is strengthening feminist voices. So under this particular area, we provide grants and support that strengthen grassroots feminist leadership and movements. So projects that develop new feminist discourses, or projects that mobilize on the ground, feminist research, any kind of activity supporting feminist leadership, as well as innovative approaches that use media, ICT, and other such things. We also support core costs here, especially for grassroots groups that do a lot of the feminist mobilization at local levels. So that's what we cover under, those kind of projects would get covered under this particular priority area. Again, this is an indicative list. There can be more, strategies and more approaches that would work within this, but just, the broad frame is what we're sharing here today. The second area for us is access to justice. This is where we've supported initiatives that focus on increasing women, girl, trans, and intersex people's access to justice through a variety of interventions, such as raising legal awareness among the communities, creating pathways for survivors to access lawyers or access the judicial system, training paralegals from the community. So interventions such as these are some of the interventions that we've already supported and will continue to support under this particular priority area. The next priority area that we have is autonomy, decisions, and sexual rights. So under this, we promote the right to sexuality, decision-making, and bodily autonomy of women, girls, trans, and intersex people. So all projects and interventions that focus on these areas would be covered here, including work on young women's leadership choices, addressing child and forced marriage, a host of interventions on LGBTIQ rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights, abortion rights, etc. The fourth theme that we have is environment justice. So under this particular thematic, we've supported and look to support work that centers the voices and leadership of women, girls, trans, and intersex people when it comes to issues of access and distribution of resources, such as land, water, food, and other natural resources. It supports issues on right to clean water, safe living, working environment, climate-related displacement, indigenous and Adivasi rights around deforestation, and supports groups that work on these particular issues. So groups such as migrant workers, women farmers, women with disabilities, and any groups that are particularly located in an ecologically fragile environment and are affected by environment disasters as well. Finally, under movement and labor priority area, we've supported interventions that focus on women, girls, trans, and intersex people's right to safe migration, to economic justice, as well as labor rights. We've also supported and we look to support groups working with vulnerable, informal, and stigmatized sectors such as sex work, garment factories, tea plantations, domestic work, and migrant labor. Again, just to iterate, this is a list of indicative examples within each of these priority areas. There could be a lot more that we can support. And sorry, if you don't see your project covered or the issues that you work on covered within this, please do still apply to us. We're always looking at emerging issues that we should support based on local context and evolving challenges that women, girls, trans, and intersex people face in accessing their rights. So if there is any issue that you feel is not covered here, please do feel free to apply and we'll definitely consider that as well. Okay, just, this is an important part of what we don't fund because we do get a lot of applications. So it's important to just make sure that you are matching your eligibility with what we can and can't support. We do not support any strategies that violate women, girls, trans, and intersex people's rights. These would include strategies that are anti-abortion, anti-LGBTIQ rights, raid and rescue strategies, and anti-sex work strategies, just to give you some examples again. We do not support groups whose primary purpose is service delivery, humanitarian assistance, poverty alleviation programs that look at microfinance, income generation, education, literacy, skills development, etc. We do not support any for-profit groups, any kind of groups that are affiliated with electoral or party-based political activities. We do not support educational institutions, academic research. We also don't support any branch, chapter, country offices of any multilateral organization, UN agency, or any of the international organizations that are based in the global north. Okay, so I'm just going to pause here for a minute. If you have any questions at this point and you've not yet sent them, please do send them via chat to my colleague Milene. Look for the Ask Me name and just send in your questions. We'll take them all in a few minutes right after the presentation's finished. All right, so I'll just move on to talking about the specific programs that we have open under this call. So based on who you are and the kind of work you do, you can choose from 2 grant programs for your funding request. The first one is called Strengthening Feminist Movements. Under SFM, we essentially support individuals and small organizations. So when I say small organizations, annual budgets of less than $50,000 that work at local, subnational, or national levels. The amounts for the grant generally vary between $5,000 to $10,000, again, depending on the applicant. The applications under SFM don't require a program component. This means you can apply as an organization for a fully institutional grant to cover your core costs of rent, operations, salaries, etc. This can be to cover your gap funding for other projects. This can be for doing organization sustainability work, building your capacity as an organization to take on more projects, whatever that is. If you're an individual applicant, again, this is the program under which you can apply. The specific details for this are again in our call guidelines, so I would urge you to please look at that as well as a reference. The grants under this particular program are very short-term grants. So either a 6-month grant or a 12-month grant is what we usually give. Applications for SFM can be submitted to the online form in English and in regional languages via email. As Milene had earlier mentioned, the call guidelines are also available in 10 regional languages. So please feel free to go through the language that you're most comfortable in, and then you can fill out the application form as well. So the entire call package, including the budget template, etc., are also available in these languages. The second option that's available is to request funding under the Leading from Southground program. Now, this is a grant program that we have open for larger organizations, networks, and consortiums that are working at either a national level, sub-regional, or regional levels. So any multi-country projects or those that are led by consortiums can apply under this. LSF focuses on 3 areas: participation, voice, and agency. So programs that address these will be prioritized. There are no fully institutional grants under this one. However, there are variations of institutional component, depending on whether you're applying under the Frontline Defender category, the Amplifying Voices category, or the Promoting Regional Feminist Agendas category. Depending on the category, between 30 or 40% is what's available. So you can again look at the call guidelines to see which category would you be most fit in, and then accordingly the institutional component requirements as well. Applications here need to be submitted only through the online form and only in English at the moment. Again, like Milene mentioned, we are working to make things more accessible. So in the next grant call, we'll try and see what we can do with regional languages and accessibility for this one as well. Okay, just another quick pause. I hope you're all still with me on this. Next segment, we'll just talk about very briefly on how to apply. So now that you know about the 2 funding programs and then you're ready to start your application, the first thing that you need to do is look at which grant you can apply for. And there's a very handy quiz that we have for this. So if you go to our website, on the top right corner, there's an Apply for a Grant button. You click on that, you'll find this tool there. You just answer a couple of quick questions, and it lets you know which grant would be most suited to the kind of organization and project that you have. So you can choose from that. If you find yourself eligible for both SFM and LFS, you can send in 2 applications. And should both your applications actually be selected, just to let you know, we would only be able to support 1 grant from the 2. But please feel free to apply for both if your work and your organization is eligible for both. The other documents to read before you start your application are the call guidelines and the grant making FAQs. So most of your queries can also be answered within those. You'll see a lot of detail for both SFM and LFS. There are 2 separate documents. You can see in detail what are the funding eligibility criteria, what are the other requirements for each of these programs. So you can make sure that your grant application meets all of those and is not actually rejected for a technical mismatch. Yeah, okay. And don't forget to look at the checklist of required documents in advance. This is the most important document when you're starting your application, because often the requirements that need to go with your application are things like audit reports, your registration documentation, your annual reports, board documents, things like that. So if you're interested in applying, there's only 2 weeks, or a little more than 2 weeks left for the deadline. So I would suggest you look at this checklist as soon as possible and make sure that you have all the documentation, additional documentation ready. And then when you sit to apply, you can just straight and send in your application. And also the requirements for documents might differ based on SFM and LFS. So again, would be helpful to go through that before. Download a copy of the proposal form and the template, budget template. Familiarize yourself with these as you build the proposal. So even if you're planning to apply online, it's always helpful to just go through the document offline and just see what are the questions, so you're prepared for what needs to be written in when you're building your proposal. Okay, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Wei-san, to take us through the application tips. Wei-san.
Thanks, Himachi. So, we do receive a very high volume of applications, and it's a very competitive process. So we hope that some of these tips will help push your applications ahead. Right, so before we dive into the tips, I'm just going to share some key information. I'm highlighting the deadline of 2nd April because we strongly recommend that you plan to submit your application at least 2 to 3 days in advance. We really don't want you to miss the application deadline because of technical issues, whether with the online form or with your email. For both the LFS and SFM call, as Himachi said, you can apply online. And to do this, all you need to do is go to the LFS or SFM web pages, which I'm happy to say are now both back up. So you go to the 2 web pages and the links are on the slide. And on those web pages, you will find a green apply here button. And I have a picture of that on the slide as well. And once you click on it, that will take you straight to the application form. And the form for SFM is in yellow, and you can see that you find that on the slide on the top right side, and the LFS form is in purple on just below it. If you are applying online, one tip about online application is the save and resume function that is on the top right-hand corner of the form. You will find a text that says, save my progress and resume later. So if your form is stuck, for example, you can't type in anything into the fields, using this function will save your form and reset the problem. Now, when you click submit, the online form will give you an opportunity to make corrections. You must click confirm to finalize and send your application after you take a look at your form and make sure that there are no corrections that you wish to make. For the SFM call, you can also email your application. And if you are applying on via email, please ensure that you respond to all the questions on the Word document and mark not applicable if the question is not relevant. I also want to highlight, and Himachi actually has been highlighting this also, that for the SFM call, you can apply for a core or institutional grant, meaning that you can either apply for partial operational and partial program support or only operational support, which need not be tied to any project. And these institutional grants, they can be used to fill funding gaps of ongoing or new programs. And if you are applying for an institutional grant, then please tell us about the overall context of your work, the strategies, overall kind of your organizational goals, instead of for a very specific project. The LFS call is geared a little bit more towards programmatic support. So as Himakshi says, just have a look at the guidelines, and that will tell you, which category will allow up to what percentages. Right, so going on to the tips when you start. I know there are a lot of documents involved. So when you start, I think the most important thing is to find out if you are eligible. So before you put in all that effort into an application, please do find out if you are eligible. And we do have an eligibility tool that you can access at our website at the Apply for Grant page. This tool will also help you decide which grant you want to apply for, because as you know, we have 2 active calls for proposals and they're quite different. So the guidelines will tell you things like the eligibility requirements, what are the thematic and other priorities, what is the grant size, the duration, what we will and will not fund. FAQs, will answer your burning questions, such as, how many applications you can submit, what are the exceptions, etc. And the checklist, as Himakshi said, in particular is very important because it tells you what documents you must submit. And, if you do not have some of these documents, please share an explanation in your application. So for example, if you're a newly formed organization and you only have audits or annual reports for 1 or 2 years, let us know. Just explain. Yeah. Right. So the next tip, number 2. In your application, please clearly explain the identities that you hold as an individual or organizational applicant. Who are you working with? What communities are you or your organization representing? What is your connection and your embeddedness within the community? A very important question for WFA is whether your organization or the proposed work is self-led. That is because we do prioritize self-led groups, meaning that the highest decision-making bodies within the organization is representative of the constituency with which you are working. So for example, an organization working on trans rights is led by a trans person, or an organization working on labor rights issues is led by garment workers. So please tell us, if your organization or the work is led by the target community and how that community is involved in decision making. And tip number 3, please explain why your work is necessary or critical and how you stand out from the crowd. If you have previous activities or this is a continuing program that the grant builds or that the application builds on, please tell us about that. Tell us about the change that you're seeking to achieve. What are the activities that will lead to this change? What is important also is to ensure that your proposed plan is realistic. We know that you understand your context, your issues, and how best to solve them. So you do not need to put in more activities to make an application seem more worth funding. That is not what we're looking at. What we're looking at is things like if you're working in a difficult context or you have limited access to resources, all of these will be taken into account during the review process. Please note also that your application may be read by someone from a different part of Asia who does not fully understand your working context. So please help the reviewer see these connections and tell us about the context in which you are carrying out your work. And that's it. That's our top tips. Please, let us know what you found useful and what you would like to hear more of so that we can continue to refine the kind of information we share with you.